Hello everyone, and welcome to our next lesson on our beautiful autumn leaves. And I started with the chimes because a couple of you have asked for them, and I'm happy to play them for a minute. I love them. And I usually use them for more of my morning, like, intuitive practice. But I also use them when I just need to sit and close my eyes and calm down for a minute, right? And it's just a beautiful, beautiful sound. So thank you for asking me to play them. So today we're going to continue on, and we're going to work on one leaf at a time. Now that we have the base down, we've got this nice glowing color, we can just kind of start with one leaf and work on it and then flip around just like we did last time. We're still going to be putting some washy stuff down, so it's not a good idea to paint one that's right next to the other, but we can sort of skip around and see how far we get. Let me just here undo my water. So we were using our little basically split primaries, right? And I had a little bit of Viridian, and so I'm going to actually put a little bit of Viridian on my plate because I don't have a pan of it. I'm just going to take a tiny bit and put it on my plate. You can use whatever green you have. It really does not matter at all, as long as you like it, and you can adjust it with yellow or blue or red to make it a little bit different. Okay, let me just move this safely out of the way, and I'm going to go back to a small brush, and I'm thinking my size 1. And I'm also going to pull out my size 2, just in case. Just in case I need a little bit more. But basically small brushes. And remember how I talked about how shorter bristled brushes like this one give you more control, and longer brushes give you a little bit more flexibility and freedom, and they also hold a little bit more paint. Okay, these are not that different in size, but the length makes a difference. Okay, even with my brushes like this, so I have, these are 000s. I have 3 different kinds depending on what I'm using it for. And like this really, really tiny 000, I don't know if you can see this. It's so small, right? So small, so short. This is really good for doing stippling and things like that, and just really having tremendous control. And when you don't need to do a lot of long lines, because you've got to refill this constantly. And then I've got this longer 000 for things that are a bit more fluid. I need a little bit more paint, like if I'm painting veins, I would use a longer one. And then this one is sort of in between, right? So it's important to have the right tools. And I hesitate to have people go out and buy a bunch of tools like brushes. You usually buy one when you need one, and then, you know, so if I feel like there's a particular brush that would really help a project, I'll talk about it, you know. And this one is a Winsor & Newton Series 7 in a size 1, and this one is a Raphael Sable 8408 in a size 2. You certainly do not need to buy brushes that are this expensive. When you're talking about small brushes like this, really any brush is okay as long as it goes to a point, okay? All right, so stay within your budget, and if you're just a beginner, there's really no reason. There's really no reason. I really work my brushes, and so it's, you know, some I don't. I mean, some, like my really thin 000s, these are $3 a piece, you know, so but I go through them faster, right? So, but they're really good. So it just depends, but you certainly don't need to go out and buy a Winsor & Newton Series 7 brush by any means. Okay, so let's start here with our red leaf, and I'm gonna mix up some color. And for mixing, I'm just going to grab another brush because yeah, I don't want to ruin my delicate brushes by mixing. So I'm going to start with my permanent alizarin crimson, which is the main color of that red leaf. And so I basically need that color in a really pure form All right, and I might add just a touch of warm yellow to it. My warm yellow is Indian yellow. I might add a touch of warm yellow to it, just like a little touch, just to warm it up, just a tad, because it is, alizarin is on the cool side, so I'm warming it up just a touch with that. I'm gonna put a little bit more in there, and this one is Permanent Alizarin by Winsor & Newton. Okay, and then I want it to be, I want to also have a darker version of it. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a little bit of this mix, pull it over to the side because I don't need much, and I'm just gonna add some sepia to it. You could also add raw umber if you have a dark raw umber. You could also add a dark green. You could also add a little bit of blue and a little bit of yellow. But I'm just putting a little sepia in there to get a nice dark reddish brown. Okay, and that's really all I need for that first leaf. So our main task in the beginning is to paint a layer on top of what we have so we can show the veins of the leaf. Okay, so the veins in our leaf are very, they're not terribly light and they're very faint. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna paint shapes from the stem out, okay? And we're gonna leave a little bit of space where that vein is. So I'm gonna use my number 2 brush because I like that it holds a lot of paint. I'm gonna roll my brush in that paint so it's really full. And then I'm gonna start at the top, and I see that the first vein, and you know what? I'm gonna go to the side of the center vein, all right? And I see the first one, the shape of it, it kind of comes out all the way down to like here. And I'm just gonna paint that in. All right, so this takes some time. I'm trying to teach you guys a method of slow work, all right? So then I go down just a little bit and I start the next one, but I'm leaving a little tiny thin bit without paint on it. All right, and then I can pull it down, just refilling my brush as I need to. And I'm looking at where the next line is, and I'm pulling this down, and it goes to about here. And then I can just paint that in. So I'm leaving a little bit of it unpainted, and I'm painting these in sort of blocks. So if I hold this up, hopefully you can see that. You see that? How I've left a little bit of light, and that's the vein. All right. So now I'm going to leave a little bit of light, and I'm going to paint the next area. And I'm looking at that one goes down to about here. So I can paint under this vein. Very, very tiny. And then come down, and it comes to about here. So just look at your reference. It doesn't have to be absolutely precise, exact. Just do your best, and know that on this leaf, veins tend to end at one of these junctures. Oops, look what I just did. One of these junctures where the tooths are, they kind of end in between, okay? So I'm gonna grab some more. It's getting harder for me to see them down here, so I'm gonna do it, but it just kind of goes to here, all right? I'm gonna do one more, and then it gets really hard for me to see them. And so if I can't see it, I tend to not paint it. But I'm still gonna paint the sections because we want that rich color happening. And then I might see a tiny hint of it. Just leave a little hint. I certainly don't see any veins at the bottom, at least not in my copy. You might. If you see them, you can paint them. Okay, so I put a nice layer on here. Now it seems like I picked up more paint there, so I'm actually going to add another layer on, staying away from those veins, just to match it. I don't know why I did that, but if I find myself doing that, then I try to make it match. And it's not because this was dry, it just, for some reason, I didn't mix my pigment well enough. And it definitely made a difference. So always mix up your paint before you pick it up with your brush. Okay, so that side's done. All right, it looks really, really good. Now, it has no, it has a little bit. So I'm gonna take a little bit of that dark red, and it's just got a tiny bit on this side of the vein. There's a few little spots, and I can just drag a little bit through to give it some variation and make it look more real. And it has to be done while it's still wet. So any blemishes you see or like faintly dark areas, you could just add in a little bit of your darker color that we mixed up. Okay, now this one, I have a light one here and here. They're very, very faint, so I'm just gonna still paint it that way and try to do it fairly quickly so I can drop in this dark color when it's all done. So I'm gonna move my reference here, angle my painting so it's helpful to me. And I'm gonna stick to the same sort of plan. I'm leaving a space for the vein. Just a little space. And I really don't see veins here, but I'm still gonna try to match it just the way I paint it on. All right, so even if you don't see, you might see a little bit at the top. But the way I'm painting it on matters. So you want to still paint in direction of form, so the direction that the leaf is growing, direction of its contours, I'm still maintaining that. And I'm still just painting each section, even if I'm not leaving a whole lot for the vein. It's good practice to do that. Especially when you're working with symmetrical things. Grab a little more paint. It's just so beautiful, this color, gosh. All right, while it's still wet, I'm gonna grab that dark color and I'm gonna drop in. I see more on this side, so I'm gonna drop it in where I see it. I see quite a bit on this very edge, and I'm just gonna drop that in and let it work its magic. Okay, maybe even a little bit more right there. Okay, rinse my brush, dry it off. Make sure that my edges are really nice and that I don't have any bright white areas. There, I'm pretty happy with that. I don't like that vein's standing out so much, so I can just kind of take my brush and move the paint over it. Okay. Same with here. Just sort of soften it. See? Okay, Now I'm going to take some of this dark color, and because the stem is darker on top, I'm just going to add in a little bit of that dark color at the very top of my stem. Okay, so that one's done. Now obviously it's far too wet to go onto this leaf, so I can go on to this one. So this one, let's pull our reference down. So this one, we've got a lot of the golden yellow and we've got an orange, okay? And then we've got a little bit of the red in here, all right? So let me get my mixing brush. So I'm gonna mix up, I'm gonna get some of that golden yellow on the plate, and pretty much we can use our Indian yellow and just add a tiny touch of violet to it. So if you have to mix violet with red and blue, that's fine, but just to mute it out a touch, right? And then I want to get more of this alizarin, make a little puddle next to it. Maybe there's just a touch of alizarin in there too. Okay, and then I want to add that yellow, the warm yellow, to the alizarin to give myself an orange. And it's a reddish orange. It's not a bright orange, okay? And then I've got some of these other colors that I can drop in for the red area. Okay, let me just mix this up. And I think I'm going to add just a touch of lemon yellow to this to give it some brightness, some cool yellow in there. Okay, so I'm back to this brush, and someday I'm going to figure out how to have more room to show you guys more stuff, but the thing is, then you can't see it up close, and that I want you to be able to see it up close. So, okay, so I'm going to start at the top. You have your own reference, so I'm going to keep mine out of the view because it's just easier for me. All right, I'm going to start with my golden yellow and just sort of saturate my brush with it. All right, and I'm going to start on the right side. So because this leaf has a darker vein, all right, it's not a lighter vein, it's a darker vein, I don't have to worry about leaving it so much, but I'm still going to leave a little bit of space. I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to paint it in the way that I see the veins. So pulling it down to this right here. So even if it's not exact, you want to pull it down to right below where that notch is, like that. All right, grab the next one, fill it in, and it's going to end at this notch. Okay, and then I'm going to grab, I'm sorry, we should have just some regular sepia too. So while this is still wet up here, I'm going to take a little bit of sepia on my brush, and I'm just going to add in a tiny bit on the tip of my brush. And just sort of pull it down. It's a little bit darker than it is on there, but that's okay. And just sort of skip it around while this layer is still wet and add a little bit of that detail. You can just dab it. That works pretty well. While I have this on my brush, I'm just going to do the top of this leaf. Okay? All right, now I'm going to pick up that, a little bit of that orange, and I'm going to drop a little bit of the orange down toward the bottom of the leaf where it overlaps. okay? And then let it spread up a little bit this way. All right, so we're just sort of doing it section by section. And grab the gold again. We're gonna always start with the gold. Gives us a nice light base. All right, now we could really worry about these veins if we wanted to, but I say just sort of make them end at a notch. Okay, let's not get too complicated with the veins. All right, we'll do two sections. And just mostly try to keep it in the correct shape so this really bends down to this notch. Okay, there's no real brown in there, but I do have some of the orange. So I'm going to start here and put the dark orange into this area where they're overlapping. And then I'm going to just touch the orange along here and see how it just sort of feathers up. Okay. All right, then we're going to go a little bit further down. So there was no brown in there. I didn't need to add any brown. So I'm going to use the yellow, and it kind of goes between that notch, like right in here, these little notches. That's where the veins end. So you can end your yellow paint there. And same with that one. And then this one goes all the way down to the bottom. Grab my orange again. This is pretty much all orange, so I can just drop in that orange along the vein lines to give it a little dimension. And then the tip is pretty much all orange. And when I'm dropping the orange over the yellow, it makes it that beautiful color. Okay, down here I've got a little tiny bit of brown, so I'm going to grab a tiny bit of sepia or brown, umber, anything like that. And I'm just going to put that little dot right here, just a little tiny one. We'll emphasize it later, but it's nice to have a soft one that's kind of wet and diffuse. It always looks more natural when you do it that way. And maybe I'll come down here and just put a tiny bit on this tip. Just got a little bit of brown on my brush. All right, so now we can do the other side of the leaf. And remember that we're painting the leaf, So this part here belongs to this leaf, so I'm not going to paint it. All right, I'm going to make a little bit more of my warm yellow. Touch of violet. And some cool yellow for brightness. All right, so I'm going to start with my golden yellow over on this side, and I'm just going to do two, and I'm coming right up to, we're going to do the veins later, okay? Right up to the edge, and I'll do one more up to that vein, leave a little space. We're going to paint those later. Okay, I'm going to take a little tiny bit of the orange. We don't have much here, but I'm just going to focus it sort of right at the edge of the veins, just to give it a little bit of a hint of that color, because it's there, but it's just really faint. And then I'm going to grab some sepia. And again, just on the tip of my brush, just drop in a little bit of sepia on that edge, so it's not too hard. You can even just dab it, right? Just dab it there, and there's a little bit in here, so. When you do it when it's wet, it just gives it a better effect. Okay. And now from here on out, we'll still use the gold, but there's a lot more orange. So I'm going to come in, paint my yellow. And it works to do like two at a time. We don't want to go much farther than that because then it dries. And remember, these are angled downward. Okay, grab some orange and stick to the inside area by the stem in the beginning, and then kind of bring it down where the veins are. Okay. Grab more yellow, move down. Okay, grab your orange. And again, stick to like by the center vein and let it sort of flow from there. Stick to around the veins. It seems to sort of hug the veins on this one. And then down here, it's pretty much all orange, so you can just dot it on. But it likes that diffuseness, right? Just makes it look more real. There's a tiny bit of brown. I'm gonna use a little bit of that dark red and just put a little right there. There's still a little bit down in here. Okay, so that one is done. I'm going to take some of my dark red and I'm going to paint the stem. Not dark red, the regular red. All right, and then we'll do more on that later. Okay, so we can't do this one, so we're going to move on to this one. All right, and this one is mostly golden yellow with a little bit of that lemon yellow in it. So we can just stick with the same mix. All right, and then the rest of it is sepia. So just make sure you have sepia nearby that you can dip your brush into. All right, we're gonna start on this side. We've already got a start, right, on that. So same thing, our veins are darker, but we're still gonna stay in line with them when we paint this layer on. Because, so it just sort of ends there. And then there's one right below it that ends here at that notch. Okay, and there's not too much going on there, but there's a little bit. I'm going to use the dark red and just grab some of that, and just where these leaves overlap, I'm just dabbing it on to give it the appearance that it's in shadow from underneath, okay? And then I'm gonna grab a little bit of sepia and then just add a few little dots. And we'll add more of that later. Okay. And then I continue down. There's the notch, so we'll do 2 of them to this notch. Such beautiful glowing color now by using layers, right? Again, grab some of that dark red and drop it in toward this edge of the leaf, just a little bit on the tip of your brush, and it's just where it overlays the other leaf. Okay, it's kind of magical. Then I'm going to grab sepia, and I've got some, so I'm really going to drop it in here. All right, where I see it. And remember, we'll still have a layer where it's veins and fine details, right? But we want to sort of lay the groundwork. Layers are key. Layers build depth and dimension. They build a translucency, it looks like layer upon layer. And they're really important when you're doing this kind of work. So think of it as you're slowly building this leaf. It's just beautiful, right? So I don't have any shadow that I need to worry about, but I will take a little bit of sepia and just drop in a little bit more on that area that we started. So we're building this sort of realism now and just adding in a few little dots of it here and there with the tip of my brush. And the very tip we'll make dark, okay? Even go in and add a few more. All right, now we'll move to the other side. I'm gonna add a tiny bit of orange. Okay, there. All right. Starting at the top, same thing. Try to get those shapes in, right? That we see, and we'll do 2 at a time. To the notch. These veins are either non-existent or dark, so we'll add those next week. Okay. Just a little sepia on the brush to add in a couple little spots if you want to. Not too much. Okay, back to our yellow. On this side, it's mostly just yellow. I need water on my brush. Okay. Yeah, make sure your paint is not dry. You want it to be fluid. But you also don't want too much. So, like I just see, I got too much paint on my brush there, and that could dry with a hard edge. So I'm just taking a clean, damp brush and just wicking up the extra paint. You don't want too much either. Heading back here, painting the next section, ending at that notch. And I know I ended the notch from just studying the drawing, I mean the reference. Okay, so I'm gonna add, take a little bit either of that dark red or the sepia and just drop in some spots. Just to give it a little realism. This one doesn't have a whole lot, but I'm just adding a little bit more for fun. Okay, go back to my yellow to finish it up. And by the time we're done with all these, we should be able to go back to do this one and just kind of fill in between. Okay, and this I'm just going to use a little bit of that dark red, a little bit of sepia maybe, and again just drop in some random little dots here and there. Okay. All right. Now we're going to move to this one. So this one we're mostly green. All right, so I'm going to get my mixing brush and I'm going to mix up some Viridian. And I'm going to put it right here. All right, and I'm going to add a little bit of this yellow to it to brighten it up. And maybe a little bit of lemon yellow to get that nice vibrant green that we see. And then the rest, we've got that sepia and dark red. So I'm going to actually mix a little bit more of that dark red. So That was alizarin crimson and sepia or raw umber. And I want it to be pretty dark. It's dark, right? That's good. Okay. And I've got the red and stuff if I need that. Okay, so I'm going to start with green and start at the top. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm just painting. So this one kind of comes down this way. All right, I've got that nice bright green. I might add a little bit of yellow, a little more yellow to mine. Okay, I'm going to do 3 because they're so narrow and small. I can get away with 1 more. All right, and then just starting to get that blush of this color, so I'll just dab it in there. All right. Use the green as my base, always. Leave a little bit of room. I'm painting around this yellow, so we got to be careful with that. Even though I've got the red there, I'm putting the green as my base. And that's how we're getting these beautiful layered effects with that red peeking through on the vein. Grab the dark color that I made, and it's pretty much all that, so I can just drop it in freely. But missing the veins, I'm just going to leave the veins showing a little bit. Okay. I'll go back to my green. I'll go in there, just finish it off here. And remember at the bottom here, it's sort of that bronzy color. So I'm just going to take yellow on the brush with the green and just pull it down. And then grab my dark and drop it in. Beautiful. Okay, and then the same thing on the other side. So grab my green, put a little bit of yellow in that green. Notches, and it's just green here, so I'll leave it that way. And then the next one, and then starting to get a little bit, right, of the darkness. Green. Just go ahead and finish it off. And down here, I'm just going to grab a little bit of yellow and bring it up to meet the green. So we get that sort of bronzy gold color down there. I grab my dark and it's pretty much all dark, leaving a little bit of those veins showing through. We'll decide later if we want to paint them or not. Okay, and this is, you know, when you're doing this layer, if you've got one off the edge like this is your chance to really make those points nice. There, perfect. Okay, so now I think this is dry enough to go ahead and do this red one in here. So we can go back to our alizarin crimson and red. All right, same kind of thing. Alizarin crimson and orange. So I'm taking a little mix of a little bit of the orange, a little bit of the red, and painting my shapes, leaving a little bit of space in between, painting right up to that one. Do 3 of them. Okay, take a little bit, tiny bit of that dark red that we made and just edge, run it along the very edge of this, the tip of your brush. Just a little bit, okay? Now, while this one's still wet, I want to take a clean, damp brush, and I'm actually going to use my smaller brush, but whatever you have, and then just clean, damp, okay? It's been washed and dried off on my towel, and I'm just going to pull the brush through like that, just to bring a little bit of light back, okay? And we'll do that each time. And I can even bring it like all the way down on the vein, just to lift a little bit of light. And so go back to my red and orange mix and continue down. Right up to there, a little bit more. Not much happening in there, so I'm just gonna, again, use my clean, damp brush and just pull through a little bit of light, just a little bit, just to give it sort of that kind of look, okay? And then continue down, a little bit of red, a little bit of orange. Okay, and then grab some of that dark red that we mixed up and definitely drop some in down here because it's got that look to it. Just sort of dab it in there along this outer edge. Okay. All right, now we'll do the other side. So just in case you don't know what I'm doing, I'm just taking a little bit of this and a little bit of this, okay? Just make sure my brush is nice and wet. Okay. leaving a little bit of space for that vein. You know, it doesn't have to be exact, but we're trying to keep them symmetrical, right? Grab some of that dark red, drop it in towards the vein up at the top, a little bit on the edge. Rinse your brush. With a dry brush, you just sort of pull through. It doesn't have to be exact, but it just gives it that sort of modeled look, okay? And we can emphasize on that later. Grabbing more paint. And this is pretty much this color all the way down. And again, we don't really have any more of the dark until we get to the bottom. But I hope you see the value of doing each section. You get a certain look to the leaf. The leaf is put together the way it grows, and so it looks more real. And I'm leaving just the tiniest bit of a suggestion of the veins, just the tiniest bit. This is pretty much just all going to be this color, so I don't need to stop. I can just continue on. Except I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to just lift a little to give it that mottled appearance. All right, and then grab more and then take it down to the bottom, and then we'll add some of that dark. Grab some of that dark and then drop in a little bit down here. Okay, and then this one you can just sort of add some of that dark red up here. All right, now we'll move on to this one. We're going back to our golds and then the mix with a little bit of the dark red for here. So get some of my gold and make sure you don't, like, so I've got a little bit of green in my gold now, so I'm going to mix up some more and make sure that it's nice and bright. And I'm going to be using the gold and the orange. So I've just got a nice little puddle of gold there to draw from. Okay. So I'm going to start the same way at the top here. This one's sort of coming down this way. I've got one right underneath it. We're always starting with the base color of the leaf. Okay, and the base color of this leaf is gold. And then I'm grabbing my orange and I'm just dropping it in. So it gets that mottled look, right? It's not perfect. Just dropping it in close to where the veins are. More yellow. Bring it down. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to add a little bit of orange. And then I'm going to grab some of that dark red and paint it, just drop it very lightly, drop it where these leaves overlap each other. Okay. More gold. Skipping a little bit where the vein is, as always. I think you probably have the hang of it by now. I'll go ahead and finish this one. gorgeous. A little bit of orange up in here mostly. Then it becomes pretty yellow down here, so I'm going to stop that orange, right? But I need a little bit of that dark red to finish off this shape where the leaves overlap each other. Okay, otherwise we're done. Now we can go on to the other side of it. So starting up here, same thing, yellow, or golden yellow. A little bit of orange, kind of toward the bottom here. Just pay attention to your reference. Maybe a little bit of this dark red. And back to the yellow. This is one of my favorite things to do. I just love painting these leaves. And this one is particularly fun, I think. Okay, bring it down. Orange. Pretty strong. The orange is pretty strong in here, so I'm going to drop it in nicely. See how it stays away from the veins? Just looks really natural that way. And then we'll come down here and we'll finish off with the yellow. Maybe pull a little bit of that orange down into it. And I'm just going to grab a little bit of lemon yellow on my brush to finish off. Keep it really bright down there. All right. And we have one more, and this one is very, very lemon. And then we'll use a little bit of our orange and dark red and green. So I'm going to just stick with lemon yellow just to keep it nice and bright. Just making a little puddle of that on my, or cool yellow, we should call it. All right, and the cool yellow is going to be our base here. So we're going to pull down cool yellow. I can do 3, I think. I can get away with 3. You do as many as you feel you can get away with. Okay, two or 3. All right, grab a little bit of that green on my brush. And again, I'm just dabbing it in to the areas where I see it. I'm just very carefully dabbing it in. We don't want too much. I can even take some straight Viridian on my see, I'm just dabbing it, just kind of letting it separate and so pretty. Okay, back to the yellow. Do these 3. Let's go right over that other color because you won't even see it. It's just a glaze. Okay, grab your green. And then grab a little bit of orange on your brush. Dab it on so it's mottled, right? And maybe a little bit more of that green on top. And that'll give it that sort of weathered look that we're looking at there. Okay? Maybe a little bit up in here. Perfect. All right, and then on to the other side. Yellow. Do those 2 sections. Grab our green. I'm really just dabbing, see? Just dabbing it, okay? Grab a little bit of orange, maybe a little bit of that dark red. Just a little bit here on this edge, just dab some in there. Okay. Back to yellow. Green. Really look at where that green is. It's just a dab. You're just doing it so it feathers out and kind of moves around and gets the effect, right? It doesn't have to, you're not copying it. You're just trying to get the effect that you see. A little bit of green here and there. Okay, a little bit of orange, a little bit of dark red. And we've got some stuff down here. My daughter's calling. Okay, and then grab some of that dark red. And we can do this the next time too, but I just want to put a little bit more up here. And then this line we're going to do later, okay? And we'll just continue down yellow. Green. Orange and dark red. Okay, and then I'll just take a little bit of yellow and enhance that little tail there. Perfect. Maybe a little bit more orange and dark red. Beautiful. Okay, everybody, let's just go across the top and add a little bit of darkness to our stems at the top, just to give them another just at the very top. There. Just keep them on their way. Okay, and let's go ahead and do one more layer on our, and I can just take some of this color, like the dark red and some of the yellow, just kind of mix it all together here to get sort of a warm color. And remember, we just pulled it across. Keep it like down below. Keep it very loose and behind the stems. I went over that one, so I need to fix that. Okay, grab more of my color. And then you're just sort of letting it dance and be really random, like little hairs. And with 3 layers like this, it'll start to have some volume. Okay, and there we have it, another week. So next week, what we'll be doing is we'll putting all those fine details on, and just making sure we have depth where we need it and that kind of thing, but mostly putting fine details on, and then we'll be done. All right, everybody, I hope you're enjoying this. I sure am. It's really nice to do a little project like this, nice and slow, and really taking our time to make it beautiful. Okay? All right, I will see you on Friday with another video. Take care.